G'day legends and welcome back to the Mighty Overlander. We're back up at the workshop with Phil the mechanic. Phil.
Mate, good to see you.
Always an absolute pleasure to have you on the channel, and if Phil's here, that means it's another install. So today we're going to be looking at the Beihouse front recovery points, which are going to be located down the bottom end of the JB74 Suzuki Jimny there. And this is going to be an absolutely fantastic install and increase my recovery capability of the front of the car. Now, quick disclaimer, Beihouse did give me these to put on the car, but they have not paid me to do any kinds of review. So that's where my man Phil's going to come in and tell you all about this gear. But what are recovery points? Well, this gives the car a really good, solid and rated anchor point for all of your different recoveries that you might need to do, whether that be using kinetic ropes, snatch straps, or even doing things like double line pulls with a winch, which we've just installed on the car as well, which is absolutely fantastic. Now, today we're going to get these on our usual format. We'll do a quick unboxing, a bit of an idea of what they actually look like. Phil's going to give you his first impressions because being an industry expert, he's got a keen eye for these kinds of things, and then we're going to get stuck straight into that install. And this one should be a pretty quick one and not too complicated at all. All right, guys, you go get yourself a nice cold one. We will get cracking into this video and we'll see you on the other side. Enjoy. So guys, as always, the format that we run is we open them up, have a little bit of an unboxing and review. Phil gives you his first impressions of the kit before we get stuck into instruction. So Phil, first off, what do you reckon about this kit?
I reckon it's really, really good. Look, it's high-grade aluminium, billet aluminium, CNC'd, and you can tell by the quality of the machining done, these are going to do an excellent job of giving you those good recovery points. Comes with all of the essential bolts and also backing plate brackets to bolt them onto the car, and also look at that lovely CAD drawing for the boys there with all the fixings and the bolts on how it all goes together.
Now, one of the things that I really do like about these recovery points is you can see on the sides here that they've actually got a really nice rounded finish to the actual hitch point. That means that if you're using any of the soft shackle type recovery gear, that it's not going to get cut on any hard right angles or anything like that. And that's particularly important if you're trying to lighten your gear by using some of these soft shackle and rope type pieces of kit. So myself, I've personally gone away from the big heavy bow shackles and things like that and the big heavy snatch straps, and I've gone to the kinetic rope and the soft shackles. That's good. Also a fair bit safer. You know, definitely. I don't really feel like having a big lump of metal flying through the windscreen if something was to go pear-shaped and a bit of rope flying around the place. Well, look, you know, it's obviously you want to take safety into all of these things, but I know which one that I would rather. Look, I can certainly say that, especially when it comes down to the CNCing, the machining, I really like this finish on them. That's really nice. Yeah,
the anodizing is great. And did notice they've also got max load rating 3 tonne per piece.
Per piece.
So that's awesome. And it's obviously all etched and engraved onto the units.
Now, with all of these types of kit, remember that you read all of your instructions. If you have any doubts about installations, look, you know, if you're confident, give it a go yourself. However, we will always recommend that you use your industry experts like the Phil the mechanic here, just to make sure that it's all done. So when you're out on the trails, you don't have any points of failure. Now, one of the other things that I really do like is that this piece here is a replacement to the standard ARB. It's not a bash plate, it's basically that first initial protection plate that goes under there. So we just took the old one off. And actually, Phil, I'm going to quickly grab that one. All right. Now, this one here is the first one that we actually took off. And I just had this idea then. You can actually see the similarities in the pieces of kit, right? However, this has that really cool Beihouse iconography on it, and it's a really, really nice finish. Where the old one, she's had a bit of a hard life.
She has.
Okay, so those of you that have followed me on my overlanding adventures, you'll definitely know that, you know, we get pretty serious about the forward driving sometimes. Whilst I don't do hardcore rock crawling and go out of my way to break my vehicle, I still want that protection, okay? So that's going to provide a fair bit of protection there, in particular for the brand new winch that we just installed. So I want to make sure that that's all looked after.
Definitely.
Okay, very nice coverings on that one. What do you reckon?
Oh, look, once again, straight. It'll be looking at it straight bolt on. Love the machining in the front, and we'll do the biz.
Fantastic. Okay, guys, we're going to get stuck straight into this install. It's going to be pretty snappy. With any luck, we'll be able to get this done inside an hour and a half, 2 hours at the most. Yep. Okay, guys, enjoy, and we will see you under the vehicle.
All right, guys, here we are putting in the recovery points. Now we're going to start with the passenger side first because it's a pretty straightforward, simple little install. The driver's side being a little bit more technical, but we'll get to that shortly. So great with these are, they've all been CNC machined to specifically bolt onto the Jimny. On the passenger side, you can see the large cutouts here, rolls into the chassis, and the second section fits through your factory toe point, so it actually sits in there quite nicely. Secondary backing plate, really good 10mm thick steel, really good there. So I'm just going to duck underneath. We've got our countersunk bolts, which fit quite nicely. So they run through like that.
Action cameraman Tony here.
And then, now we put the backing plate in. It's got a 90-degree return which goes up onto the chassis. A little bit fiddly just to get it in there. There we go. Once that's in place, Tony, if you want to chuck me the... So we've got some washers and some nylock nuts all supplied, and they go on. Just make sure this isn't going to fall on my face. Now it's a little bit tight to the lower sway bar for the lower nut, but that's okay. And it will tighten up and give plenty of clearance once it's in place. And the top one as well. Righto, and then it's just a 6mm Allen key for the front and a 17mm socket for the back. Let's get these started. Now do it up nice and tight. Obviously don't go too nuts with it. They do have nylock nuts, so they're not going to vibrate or rattle loose as long as you do them up properly, which will be fine. And obviously, you know, bolting through the original point on the vehicle is a great idea as well, because it means you've got the extra rigidity when you are getting yourself out of trouble or helping someone else get out of trouble. So you're not going to have any issues with toe points breaking off the vehicle or flying out when you've got everything under load. I'll just finish the last of that tightening up there. And that is the passenger side all finished. All right, guys, back to do the other recovery point from Beihouse. So we're doing the driver's side this time. A little bit more involved in this one than the passenger side. Reason being is we're going to replace two bolts that hold the steering box into the chassis. So there still comes with the backing plate for the bottom three bolts, but then what's happening is we're going to replace two bolts that will go through the actual recovery point, through the chassis, through the steering box, and then bolts it all up nice and tight, so even more structurally sound than even the passenger side one. A little bit more involved with it because we need to undo a couple of bolts for the radiator support to extract one of the bolts. I think it's the top one, according to the guys at Beihouse. So yeah, a little bit more work, but still pretty straightforward, and we'll get cracking on this one now. Just backing the bolts off on the steering box. So the bottom one you can extract pretty easily from underneath with the under trays off, but the top one looks like we need to undo a couple of the rad support mounts and just move it to extract on the inside, the actual engine bay. So chatting to the lads at Beihouse, they've given us that little tidbit of information. So we will get these ones loose and extract the original bolts. Now once that's done, we can then offer up the actual recovery point and get that in place, roll the two larger bolts in first, and then we can put the supporting plate on secondary. So I'll get cracking on this and won't be too far off. All right, so we've just loosened the third bolt on the steering box, which gives us just the extra little bit of wiggle room we need to get the bolts out. So the lower one comes out pretty easily. And then, which is no issue. But now we need to go into the engine bay and undo two rad support panel bolts so we can extract the top bolt from the steering rack. And then once that's done, we'll bolt the radiator back into place, and then we'll get the recovery point bolted on. All right guys, so just undoing the 2 retaining bolts that hold the rad support panel, so the rad support in place. Now we need to move this to gain, as I said before, the top steering rack bolt out, so to extract it. So you need to be able to move this bracket out of the way, otherwise the bolt's not going to get out. There's just not physically enough room. The bolt is too long for the room that's there. So just backing these off now. A little bit tighter than I expected. There we go. So one's on the vertical and one's horizontal, so just doing the rear one now, which you can get to pretty easily with a spanner, a ratchet spanner that I'm using. And then the other one I used a long extension, which is in the front side. As you can see, already just loosening that up, just gives us that bit of room. And as you can see, it just gives us a little bit of wiggle room just to get this bolt out. So I'll get back underneath and we'll extract the bolt, and then we'll get the point in place. Cool, just finished extracting the 2 factory bolts, so they're out. Good thing is when we put the new bolts in, they actually go in from the outside inboard, so we can bolt that rad support panel back in place, and we can finish with the install. All right guys, so just on the back end of tightening up the 2 rad support bolts. Now in fact there's 3. There's a cheeky one that I undid just to make my life a little bit easier. So there's 2 12mm bolts, one that runs into the front rail in the front there, and one off the slight bracket down here. And then there's a little 10mm here that actually bolts the radiator directly to the rad support panel just here. So you can access it through this side with a deep 10mm socket, and it just gave me a little bit more flexibility when putting those, taking the bolt out. So finished bolting that back together, and we're on the back end. All right guys, so now that that rad support panel is back in place, we can actually fit the recovery point. So once again, the guys have done a great job in machining the recovery points to fit into the factory body positions. And as you can see, this time we can actually put the bolts through the chassis from the outside rather than the inside, which makes things nice and simple. Now do remember these 2 particular long bolts do hold the steering box in place, so make sure you put them in properly and do them up tight, otherwise you'll get some movement back through the steering box and you'll wonder why your steering wheel feels a bit funny. So make sure you just pay attention, do these 2 up nicely, and you should have no problem. So we'll get this bolted up, and then we'll get the secondary plate on afterwards. All right guys, so we've got the main 2 bolts in through the recovery point and through the steering box. Now just putting the secondary base plate on, which goes around the factory recovery point or tow point for normal road going vehicles. Plate goes on, there's a little notch here. There's a little notch.
Down,
Well,
down, cross, this way, back that way. No, back this way. Back that way. No, I'm with you.
You dick. Right, nice one, Tony. There's a notch on this edge here that goes towards the back of the vehicle. You'll see from underneath there's a welded point there, and that little notch lines up. Pretty straightforward. So backing plate in, countersunk bolt heads through the front, nylocks and washers on the back, tighten them up, and we're sorted. Once again, just make sure you go over all your bolts, especially the ones for the steering rack, oh sorry, the steering box. Make sure they're all tight, and that will be the right hand side recovery point fitted. All right guys, so the tow points have been, the recovery points, sorry, being bolted onto the chassis. That's all finished. Now just putting this lovely center plate back in to replace the old one. So it's just a reverse of taking them out. So just the 3 10mm in the back, just making sure everything lines up nicely. And then there's some M8 bolts in the front that we just need to tidy up. So we'll get these last couple of bolts in, and then we'll be finished for the day. I like it.
All right, team, there you have it. That is the Beihouse recovery points installed on the mighty Overlander, ready to rock and to rumble. Phil, bang up job, mate.
No, my pleasure.
As always, doing a fantastic job on the. Now, I think that you should have your own YouTube channel. I keep saying this. We keep discussing it each time. Who out there would like to see Phil the Mechanic do his own YouTube channel with awesome do-it-yourself advice, automotive tips, and all that kind of stuff? And I reckon you'd be able to get your hands on some pretty cool cars to drive around as well, mate.
Or maybe.
All right, so I reckon watch this space in the next year or so. I reckon you're going to see this bloke here doing some absolutely fantastic stuff. Once again, though, thank you very much to Beihouse for supporting the channel. Now, Beihouse is an Australian brand. They are fully CNC'd, manufactured, design and R&D'd, all of the acronyms out there that you can think of. Support your local brands, guys, otherwise they'll go away. In particular, in the four-wheel drive, overlanding, camping kind of game, one of my big things is to try and support, where possible, those Australian brands and to get their brand out there, and hopefully you guys will then go on and support them as well, like they've supported me. Okay, guys, thank you very much for watching. Go get yourself a nice cold one, and while you're doing that, hit that subscribe button and that like button, leave a little comment below, and help the channel out a little bit, because it definitely helps, especially with the algorithms and everything like that. Okay, guys, enjoy. Thank you again, Phil.
No worries.
And I hope to see you on my next overlanding adventure. Enjoy.